Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
In the US, there's been a second night of violence on the streets of Minneapolis. Riot police faced crowds of protesters angered by the fatal shooting of a black man. 20-year-old Daunte Wright was shot and died at the weekend after what the police say was an accident when an officer mistook her gun for a taser during a traffic stop. The shooting came as the high-profile George Floyd murder trial continues just a few miles away. From Minneapolis, Nick Bryant sent this report, and just a warning that it contains some distressing images.
It's a uniquely American story we've told many times before. Yet another police station besieged by yet another protest after yet another shooting of an unarmed African American. There was fury on the streets of Brooklyn Center last night. America's latest racial flashpoint, just 10 miles away from where the trial is taking place of the white police officer accused of murdering George Floyd. It began as a boisterous but non-violent demonstration. A response to the police shooting of a 20-year-old black man, Daunte Wright, by a female officer who claims to have mistaken her handgun for a taser.
Do you know the difference between a gun and a taser?
The police were determined to enforce a curfew that came into effect as dusk turned into night, and determined to force the protesters off the streets. It's a police department very much on the defensive. Not that you'd have thought it last night.
May I have your attention, please? Captain Garling.
We see these confrontations year after year. America, as ever, fractured along its angriest fault line of race.
This was the moment Daunte Wright was pulled over for a minor infraction, and the police realized there was a warrant out for his arrest. In the scuffle that followed, the officer fired her gun and immediately realized her fatal error.
Oh, wow.
She's been identified as Kim Potter, a 26-year-old veteran of the force, now placed on administrative leave.
But every time that grief grabs you...
At a vigil last night, the family of Daunte Wright demanded justice.
He was a son, he was a brother, he was an uncle, he was a father, he was a grandson, he was so much more, and he did not deserve this at all. My heart is literally broken into 1,000 pieces.
Hey, this is so crazy! I don't know what to do. I almost got hit by the police.
There was more looting last night just yards from the police station. Another urban battlefield in the ongoing struggle over policing and over race. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Minnesota.
The dusk to dawn curfew to contain protest after the killing of another black man at the hands of police was ignored by thousands last night. Here, right now, where Daunte Wright died, is calm, a place of memorial. You can see the George Floyd fist. But last night, the police station, we watched as state troopers used tear gas, flash grenades and baton rounds to drive back protesters. The chief of police said the officer who killed the 20-year-old during a traffic stop had intended to fire her taser, not her handgun. But that hasn't stopped many questioning why Daunte Wright was pulled over and how a police officer of 26 years' service could mistake her gun for a taser. A disturbing killing made all the more potent as just a few miles away the prosecution wrapped up its case against Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer accused of murdering George Floyd. There are disturbing images in this report. The refrain they have shouted at police across America, ringing out again in Minneapolis. After the shooting dead of unarmed Daunte Wright by a white police officer. Key protesters were snatched, around 40 people arrested in all. Despite claims it was an accidental shooting and promises of justice from the mayor, people here are not prepared to let it go again.
All I want to know is why are you shooting me?
We're just tired, okay? We're sick and tired of it. We've had too many black people dying, too many black brothers, all right, especially in Minnesota. We're tired of it. That's why everybody is here, and you see it. We're sick and tired of it.
And are you going to stay here?
I'm going to stay here as far as I can, as much as I need to.
And will you be arrested?
If I need to, I will be. I'm fighting for something that's way more than me right now.
The curfew was supposed to start at 7 o'clock tonight, but for the last couple of hours, hundreds of protesters have been surrounding the police station, which is cut off by lines of officers. They have fired tear gas, and every so often they advance, pushing people back, trying to disperse them.
This isn't a lawful assembly. You need to disperse to the north and leave the area. You will be arrested. Do it now.
As this was going on, the authorities revealed the officer who shot Dante Wright was Kim Potter. With 26 years' experience, she's a former local leader of the police union. Potter's body camera has revealed errors and questionable decisions. Why was Dante Wright pulled over and surrounded by 3 officers for a minor infringement? Why was he handcuffed next to the open door of his car? How, when handguns and tasers are worn on opposite sides and feel and weigh very different, did an experienced officer get confused?
Oh, wow.
And most crucially, why was she shooting anything at a man who wasn't threatening anyone, but trying to get away, clearly afraid?
We're just upset that they accidentally killed someone. Okay. We're supposed to trust them? Yeah.
At the courthouse, the prosecution of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd last May rested after 38 witnesses, ending with the painful testimony of Mr. Floyd's brother, who shed new light on why the dying man had called out to his dead mother.
He loved her so dearly. And when we went to the funeral, it's just, George just sat there at the casket over and over again. He would just say, "Mama, Mama," over and over again. And I didn't know what to tell him because I was in pain too. We all were hurting.
The defense began examining George Floyd's history of taking opioid drugs, sowing more doubt on whether he really died because of the knee on the neck. There was some criminal damage last night, but relatively few protesters were involved.
Back up, back up, back up, back up.
Many are unconvinced by assurances of accountability from President Biden and the local mayor.
I want you to understand that I'm going to do absolutely everything in my power to make sure that justice is done.
It's been going on for too long, man. I feel like this is stop. They got to stop this.
What's been going on too long?
This whole racist stuff, white cop killing a black person, all of that.
Everybody just got to come together as one, you know?
With the Floyd and Wright families effectively united now by a campaigning lawyer and supportive protests, there will be a question of whether it places the jury under more pressure. There's no doubt that if racial justice protesters were on edge with the Floyd trial, the killing of Dante Wright takes things to a new level. Well, the civil rights lawyer who represents the family of George Floyd is now also representing Dante Wright's loved ones. Speaking alongside both families at a press conference a short time ago, Ben Crump said it was unbelievable that another police killing had taken place at the same time as the trial of the officer accused of murdering George Floyd.
It is just something I could not fathom, that in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a suburb 10 miles from where the Chauvin trial regarding George Floyd was taking place, that a police officer would shoot and kill another unarmed black man. It's something that if you told me and I didn't see little Dante's face and his grandmother crying, I wouldn't believe it.
Well, joining me now from New York is DeRay McKesson, activist and co-founder of Campaign Zero, an organisation that seeks to end police violence in America. Can I just begin by asking you what your reaction is to what you're seeing here in Minnesota, these two deaths coming together in this way?
You know, in so many ways, this has been like deja vu. We've been here before. We have seen the killing on camera. We've seen the outrage. We've seen little solutions come from these things, right? You think about 2020, the police actually killed more people in 2020 than every year of data we have on record outside of 2018. And, you know, the police actually killed more people in suburbs than almost every other community combined. So this happening in Brooklyn Center, from the data perspective, actually is more representative of what's happening in the country. And the police have killed over 260 people this year. This is just the first case that's taken the national conversation.
When you look at the video, and it's clear that the officer is in shock at having shot, Mr. Wright, and the explanation that this was an accident, we've now had the resignation of the officer, the resignation of the police chief, and promises of justice from the mayor. Do you think these are reasons to be more hopeful in this case?
I mean, we'll see, right? You know, when we look at the convictions of police officers, the highest number of convictions ever in a given year has been 11. Since 2005, there have only been 5 officers ever convicted of murder. So, like, we'll see. But what's interesting about the video is that you have to remember that Kim Potter was a trainer of police. She'd been on the force half my life, right? So when you're like, did you make a mistake? I don't know if you made a mistake, right? And where was he going? I mean, he was sitting in the car. You literally could have just watched him in the car. He's not driving off. He has no weapon. Like, there was no urgency to use any weapon against him because the most dramatic thing he was even possibly going to do was sit in the car.
That is the real issue that people talk to you about on the streets here, about the whole approach, particularly to young black men, by police officers in a traffic stop. Why the need for the aggression? 3 officers out of the car, you know, weapons close by, and handcuffed for hanging an air freshener from a rearview mirror.
Yeah, and this is why I'm always reminded that this is a choice. The police will say, well, it was wild, and they were. It's like, you made a choice. In that moment, you chose to reach for a weapon, you chose a gun, and you chose the trigger. These were choices. They didn't just happen. They didn't pop out of thin air. Like, you made a series of choices that ended up with a young man. His life is gone now because you made choices. And the police always want to dilly-dally, like, oh, accident, you made a choice. And that choice resulted in murder.
But where do you think this is going? I mean, Joe Biden tweeted about his compassion for the Wright family. But even as I've been standing here, I can tell you there's been a truck flying Trump flags that's been driving past up and down, beeping its horn, sort of harassing the mourners here. This clearly threatens to go right into the divisions that have been plaguing America for so long.
Yeah, here's the thing. When we poll people around the country, people, every party, all age groups, they want change. That's the common denominator. They might disagree about how intense the change is, but nobody is like, this works. Like, no group, the majority of no group is like, what's going on today works. They're not saying that. They weren't saying it in June of last year, and they're not saying it today. So that is a good thing. I think that what we need to help people understand is that there's real possibilities. So, like, we can do some immediate things, and we can do some things that aren't as immediate, but do get us beyond policing. Do you need somebody with a gun to stop somebody for an air freshener? No. Do you need to stop somebody for an air freshener at all? No, right? Like, the data is clear that the majority of what the police are called to do in the first place actually isn't about anything that resembles violence in the first place. And when we look at the 2020 data, we're reminded that just last year, 60%, almost 60% of the interactions that led to police killings were not even things remotely suspected of being violent. About 120 people were killed last year at traffic stops. And you're like, that is, in no way does that make sense.
There is a danger here, though, as well, isn't there? That, and the defense are already beginning to argue that this is having an effect on the trial of Derek Chauvin, that the jury are going to feel affected by what's going out on the streets. Does it concern you that this could end up leading to legal twists and turns, possible appeals in the future in terms of what's going on in the streets here?
If anything, it's a reminder that police violence is not an aberration, that this is actually just a part of the culture right now in a way that needs to be transformed. So when I think about like what the bearing might be, it might be actually a reminder to everybody in that courtroom that this happens far more often than people think, that like this is happening not only in Minneapolis, but in the surrounding suburbs, and that we actually have to do something about it, that the time is now to do something. So that is what I think could emerge from this. And like, you know, again, Derek Chauvin made a choice. Kim Potter made a choice. These choices led to people's lives being taken. Like, we have to reckon with that.
DeRay McKesson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. In the building behind me, the defence case in the Derek Chauvin trial is going on. Lawyers are trying to argue that drugs and a heart condition contributed to George Floyd's death, and not the more than 9 minutes that the former police officer knelt on his neck. But this whole trial has been overshadowed now by the rising tension over the death of a young black man, Dante Wright, shot dead by police officer Kim Potter. She now faces a charge of second-degree manslaughter. No doubt the authorities hoping that will be enough to calm the protests, who took to the streets once again last night. Night 3 since the shooting dead of unarmed Dante Wright. The sheriff's departments of pepper spray. Protesters using leaf blowers to power it away. Outside the Brooklyn Center police station, both sides had clearly come ready to step things up.
If you do not cease behavior and disperse peaceably, you will be arrested.
Tonight, both sides seem differently prepared. Having marched for hours through the city today, the demonstrators are here and being slightly at the front and taunting the police with missiles. The police are in riot gear tonight, and they're being supported by the National Guard. The resignation of the officer who fired the shot, Kim Potter, had pleased no one here. If her prosecution fails, she'll be free to claim her pension and get a job with another police department.
The entire country really needs change, and I need to do my part, and I will continue to do my part until I see that change.
You've been warned to go home or you'll be arrested.
I know that. I was here last night and was told that too, but I stayed the entire time.
Please, man, we're tired of our people getting killed. We're tired of seeing this every day on the news.
The officer has resigned, and so is the police chief. Is that not enough?
That's not enough, man. We need more action. We know every time this happens, they say change, like they're gonna change something, but it just feels like it's just talk.
We cannot allow y'all to murder black men.
You've been told to go home.
That's over with. Ain't no going home. This is our home. And they're not making it safe for us to go home. So we're not going to go home.
What about the throwing of things into the police station? Do you agree with that?
I agree with whatever's going to get us justice. If that's what we got to do, that's what we're going to do.
The reaction to Dante Wright's killing has emerged now, with the demand for justice for George Floyd in a court a few miles away. At the murder trial of former officer Derek Chauvin, his defense team called witnesses to contradict the prosecution, to say Mr. Floyd didn't die because he couldn't breathe, but because of drugs and heart problems.
How did the heart and drugs contribute to the cause of death?
They contributed to Mr. Floyd having a sudden cardiac arrest, in my opinion. That's how I would read it.
Media, leave the area. Media and press, leave the area.
The police were advancing from down there, warning everybody to leave the area, and they've just put out an announcement specifically to the media, to journalists, telling us to leave or we will also be arrested. At Kim Potter's home a few miles away, barricades and roadblocks to stop protesters getting anywhere near. She now faces a charge carrying up to 10 years in jail. The law needs to prove she created an unreasonable risk and consciously took chances of causing death. So as one pivotal police killing trial here heads to a climax, another will soon begin. Well, earlier I spoke to Jacob Blake Sr. Last August, his 29-year-old son, also called Jacob Blake, was shot 7 times in front of his children and left paralysed by a police officer in Kenosha as he resisted arrest and was in possession of a folding pocket knife. It led to massive protests in which 2 people were killed. That officer, Rustin Shesky, did not face any charges or disciplinary action and has just gone back on duty. I began by asking how Mr. Blake felt about what he's seen happening here in Minneapolis.
You don't find white boys or white individuals being killed in their neighborhoods in Northbrook, Illinois, or in Hollywood, California, or in upstate New York and you don't find Caucasians being killed all over the country. You only find black young men. And that's what they obviously they're not going to stop unless we have federal intervention.
When you saw the news that another unarmed young black man had been shot here in Minneapolis, what did you think?
I hated that I couldn't be there to hold and hug their mother and father and grieve with them. And what makes you so weary and so tired is that it's almost like you're fighting against odds that you cannot overcome. That's what it seems like. It seems like the more you fight, the more they come at you. It's never ending, man.
And how is your son Jacob now? Is he still paralyzed? Because it was unclear what would happen to him.
Yes, he is. I guess that is the sentence for a pocket knife. 7 bullets to the back and paralyzation.
Here in Minneapolis, we have seen the coming together of these 2 cases of the George Floyd trial and the shooting dead of Daunte Wright. Do you think there is a bigger movement beginning here again?
It's larger than George Floyd. It's larger than Daunte. It's larger than Jacob. It's larger than Breonna. This is our society of brown people in the United States.
When Jacob was shot, President Trump was in power and the political climate was very different. You were in touch with the then candidates, Biden and Harris, and they are now in power. What has changed?
The air. If we get this George Floyd bill passed into law, it will take the immunities away from the police.
Jacob Blake talking to Christian.